I'm John Buck, and thank you very much for identifying your roles here. It looks like we've got a really good mixture of different sorts of folks in the call today. And why don't we go ahead and if you can add to the Menti, we'll be using Menti three times during the session today, and so this is your practice. We'll be having you go into Menti and then putting in a new code each time. If there are questions, please put them into the chat. Okay, and so what we're talking about today is using data-based KPIs to find out, is your whole company agile? There's been a number of attempts to create a way to extend the concept of agile that developed in the IT departments to a whole company. And what we have here is you can see the cover of the book that talks about a way that we're suggesting to do it, and that it includes a way of measuring how agile is the whole company. We proceeded by combining agile with beyond budgeting, open space, and sociocracy to create a methodology that was robust enough to go to the whole company. And
so the question is kind of, why is that even necessary?
Right, and that gets us to the question of VUCA. And everybody, I assume, is familiar with the conditions we're in. And if I could see hands, I might ask you, what VUCA condition have we just been in and are continuing to be in? And I would expect many of you would say, oh, COVID, it was a big surprise. It was something that kind of jumped on us. And so what's it going to be like as we emerge from it? There's a whole new way of working now that's been established here. What does that mean? And Jutta, let me turn it over to you.
Yes. So the thing is actually that we are in the VUCA world for quite some time, yet only now with COVID, it became so transparent to everyone, which also requires from companies to really be able to deal with that. And so to be agile. And what we mean with that is being agile more in a literal sense. So kind of like being flexible, adaptive, nimble, responsive, fast, and all of that. So we are not talking about, when we talk about agile companies, a company that is using, let's say, Scrum at the board level or so, and having a backlog there and the Scrum Master. And although this might change the meeting of the board of directors, but it doesn't make the company any more agile. So what we mean with that, if more in a literal sense, is we also looked out what's there, is what we call the Bossanova. It is looking at different areas of the company. For example, being agile about budgets and not fixing them 1 year in advance, or about having an inviting culture, which is done through using open space principles as your company strategy, for example, not putting people into boxes through the job descriptions, but more looking for the full potential of the people. Then if you look at sociocracy, it is about decentralizing the power and decision making because you don't have the time to do this in a centralized way. You will be too slow. And then agile brings in like inspecting and adapting. So these are the things we regard for company-wide agility. Now, we said this is about KPIs, and in order to know what kind of KPIs we are having here, we would like you to take a survey. Does this hopefully show correctly? A survey to you again with Menti, and reply how you regard this in your company. So how agile is your company? And just say on for each statement, like, is it true or false? And I think I have to check because I know it didn't work before, but I believe it's working now. Do you see, John, maybe you can tell me, do we see the right slide?
We see the right slide.
And I get a reply from a participant.
Yeah.
You
So
might not
I
even
think,
know what the right slide is, Cherian. But it seems you do.
yes.
So yeah, so we are waiting for you to replying on those different statements here. And again, it's a sample survey, and actually the whole survey is longer. However, we want to show you by example how you can look at how actually a company is, what that tells you, and what you can do with this information. So we hope that more than that one person is replying to it. And now we see some more people coming in.
Answers are coming in now, yeah.
Yes, and we also know those statements are maybe not so easy to grasp, and therefore we understand that you need time to reflect and think on them. And that's absolutely fine to do that. So we wait a little bit more. We see we have 25 participants and 6 people have replied, 7 so far. So we would like to get a little more data. And I see the explanation from Cherian. You have seen the slide before because it was shown at the wrong spot before, which means you had the time to think about your answers, which is even better. Okay, where are we getting? 11 responses so far. This is what we had on our first Menti, and I still hope that more people will go to Menti. I enter again the link and the code. The code is actually the same as it was before, so it should work out just going there. And what do we see right now? Let me start commenting a little bit on that. So what we see on the one hand is, oh, this doesn't work. Okay, what we see on the one hand is that here we have a spread of different people, how they are answering. However, we end up almost in the middle. So that seems to be the average, which is going down now with more answers coming in.
It's a wide spread, isn't it, on that first one?
It is a really widespread. You also see that these hills are like everywhere, whereas for the second one, it slows down towards the end. So it seems that it's more false than true. And more extreme, definitely on the yellow one. And for the last statement, we see it seems to be really more true than false. Is this everyone who wanted to answer this question? There are still 10 people who haven't replied yet.
We encourage you to let us know if you're having any trouble with that through the chat.
That's true. And see, there is one more. And again, this is a sample survey of a real survey. So it is really, it's the actual data we are collecting and which we believe will help you to understand better where you are with your company and what could be a next step, but we only use that sample. So because otherwise it would take probably too much time here. And also it gives you already a good idea of where are we heading. The sample here actually, maybe there's 1 or 2 more people answering. The sample here takes one statement of what we call 5 different dimensions. And what we want to do now is diving into these different dimensions. I want to start with giving you an overview of 4 of the 5 dimensions. Oh, wonderful. There is one more. And you can keep bringing in your data while I move on now. So I want to show 4 of the 5 dimensions. And those are values that are actually driving company-wide agility, transparency, self-organization, continuous learning, and constant customer focus. There's also a definition coming with those 4 values. And I want to kind of put out a warning here that we will just in a few minutes, seconds, dive deeper into two of those values, which is transparency and self-organization. Therefore, let me for now just look quickly at those other two where we will not look deeper into in this session today. So we have continuous learning, which says always learning, contribute to others' learning, get feedback and adapt. So the way we define learning is not only my own learning, but also how I help others to learn. Because if you think of company-wide agility, it really is about we all have to get better and all have to learn. Otherwise, it would not be company-wide. Then for constant customer focus, it says focus wide on every aspect of the company, product and process, structure and strategy, and individual contributions and people. So again, you see this, well, it's even emphasized with the focus wide. It really goes across the whole company. So that's kind of key here. And I will move over to you, John, and you will dive into one of the other dimensions.
Great, thank you. So looking at self-organization, and what we did with these definitions is we said, okay, the Agile Manifesto has 4 values, but how do we say those using the languaging of not only Agile, but beyond budgeting, open space, and sociocracy, to say it so that it applies to the overall company, because the Agile Manifesto values are fairly focused on the IT environment. And so self-organization combines, I'll just read it out here to help everybody with it. It's use accountable cross-functional teams that select themselves and follow their passion with responsibility. And so you can see in the term their passion with responsibility, that's the sort of thing that you see when you're doing not only conference open space, but organizational open space. And so that's the kind of where this comes from. And we had one of the questions was on this dimension. So the thing we ask now is, okay, how do we go about really assessing this value in your company? And so maybe Jutta, if we could go to the next slide here, let's look at it. So you'll notice that the definition of self-organization was in fact the first question, or is the first question in a battery of 5 questions looking at self-organization.
Showing back to so you see it again.
Yeah, thanks. Good. And so the bolded item there is actually the question that you saw and that you answered. And this is when we said it wasn't complete. If you were taking an entire assessment about your company, you would be answering 5 questions around the dimension of self-organization. And so that's the question that you answer. And then there's other kinds of questions here that kind of poke at is it true we're self-organized and how much? So that's the context of it. And I'm wondering if we should go ahead and see some example of results. So how do we look at that? So this would be, is not the Menti that you just took, but it's the kind of data that you get. So this averaged out at a 3.45. I think in the group that we had today, it was below, it was in the 2.9 area.
No, but the group we had today was not only looking at self-organization. Here, the average value shows for self-organization.
Right. No, on that dimension, that particular data that we had was somewhere in there. So it's actually lower than we're showing.
Let us take a look.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So here it is. It came out at 2.8. I remember it pretty well.
Very good.
And you'll notice that if you could go back to that, Jutta.
Yes.
You'll notice that the shape of the data here is more or less what we saw in the bar diagram, but it's shifted down a little bit, and it's not like too divided into two different kinds of opinions, but and it also is spread out quite a bit. And so that there's things that you can ask around all that kind of question. So let's go back and look at the other chart. You can see here that, oh, okay, there was in this chart, there was more of a high point around the 3s and the 4s being answered. I think if we had that other piece of data, it would have been aligned more around the 2s and the 3s. So you can ask the question not only in your company, but of course, then against the general database. Are we doing better or not better than everybody in the general database? Are we doing, okay, that's how we're doing right now, and now we're going to do an intervention. We're going to try some changes that allow people to self-organize more, and then we do the assessment later, and okay, we now have a before and after measure. And so that's the kind of precision that you can get by taking this data-based approach to the survey. We have some other examples of the kind of way to look at the data. This is more limited than some of the things that we can ask. And so
maybe we look at one of the other dimensions, and we are still at the 4, Diana. We will get to the 5th dimension, and look this way also at a different way how the data is analyzed. So the other dimension we wanted to look at is transparency. So the definition is create transparency for all involved in 2 directions by providing information and lowering the barriers to those seeking information. Again, you have been answering one of the statements of transparency. These are also a few asking kind of what does it mean for your company to implement the value of transparency? And another way than what we just saw, going back, we just saw that the bar diagram and looking at the results is actually looking at it in a radar.
Yeah, and Jutta, before we go there, if I could just point out one thing to if you could go back slide, this idea of transparency being lowering barriers to those seeking information reflects the concept that comes in from sociocracy. It's not like all information available to everybody, but if you need the information, you shouldn't have to be excluded from it. You should be able to get the information you need to do your role, your function, your job. And so that's just another example of how we've integrated all these different lines of thinking into these definitions.
Okay, so now looking at again a real report from a company, there the outcome just on this dimension of transparency was what you're seeing right now. So this is again what I said, it's shown as a radar. And you kind of see similar things as you saw before in the bar diagram. However, now what's easier here in this example is that you see all those different statements. And actually the one that you answered in the Menti was this one, that trust guides all collaboration, not control. And also what we just have seen was this part, that's the definition of the value itself and what we just looked at. And then we have the 3 other ones that are also seen here. Now, what we see in this example here is, and it's just a different way at looking at the data, right? Is that, well, they are kind of doing okay. They are really good with what you were answering with. So it's the trust guides all collaboration. That's kind of good. But where they really struggle is with this one. Inspection and adaptation happens in all the areas on all organizational levels with which I'm personally familiar. So probably you want to dive now deeper into ask, what does it mean? How come? How much are people really in agreement? Or is this average value more on average that some people are out there and some there? That's what you would see in, again, a different way of analyzing it. And we will look into that right just as the next thing, which would be the 5th dimension, by the way. So there are different ways how you can dig deeper, and then asking the questions and also look at what is it actually where we think this is a problem for us. So because that's also sometimes the case, and maybe that's obvious, but I see this with my clients that sometimes we see something like that this is really way lower than the others, and we think this is a problem. But when we talk about this, we find out it's actually not really a problem for us, and this one is lower too, and maybe that's the thing we really need to work more on, and we need to have more effective engagement with stakeholders, which is actually more important for our situation. So the key thing we think is always that, well, this is data, these are KPIs, but it needs all of you to do something meaningful with it. So it needs also the people in the company to make meaning of it, and then digging deeper with asking questions. Anything else you would like to add here, John?
No, I just think it's interesting that we've been finding that these are not, the results are not completely consistent, that they really are measuring different sub-dimensions within the value. And so that I think it's doing a fairly good job of reflecting the complexity of these different values, that there are different dimensions to them. There's some statistical ways you can describe that, like something called Cronbach's alpha says, are you measuring the same thing or not? And I think we're actually, they're related to each other, but the differences are important.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so only for Diana, well, everyone else can listen in as well. We are now moving to the fifth dimension. Remember, you had the four, which were those four values: self-organization, transparency, continuous learning, and constant customer focus. And we are now going into the direction. First, want to provide you with some explanations to it, to the fifth dimension. Over to you, John.
Sure. Everybody should recognize this diagram. It is the classic top-down diagram that is the basis of any of the corporations today. That the people who own the money, who own the gold, make the rules, the golden rule. And there's then a work breakdown structure, a power breakdown structure that goes from the most abstract to the most detailed. And you'll have policies above, those convert into work instructions below. There are lots of things that can be argued for this diagram, the accountability that it holds, the ability sometimes to move fairly quickly, depending upon exactly what we're talking about. It doesn't do well when you're doing major shifts of direction and big pivots, but it can get things that are set up in its structure, it can get those things done quickly. So for example, going back to COVID, the drug companies were able to ramp up production pretty well, at least in some places, even combining in the US, combining the forces. And so if it's within the range that you're used to operating, that you can get fast action with this kind of structure. So not that it's bad, but it's only one way of approaching organization. And then if we could see the next slide, Jutta. If you take the agile, company-wide agility point of view, then the diagram that we just saw, which is over on the left, where you have the board giving direction to people that are in the value center that are actually producing things for the customer. You'll notice that the down arrow is counterbalanced there by an upward arrow, so that if you are in an agile mode, the voice from below is equally as strong as that coming from the voice from above. There is a dynamic, cyclical feedback, active feedback loop that actually enables the board, if you want to be more able to steer the organization, because they have really good data as to what is the voice from below. In fact, you may even have people from below elected to sit up on the board of directors with their consent. So that really, I can tell lots of stories how that really helps make the traditional structure more dynamic. The value center, you see for the value center, if you look up above, there's inspiration is what's meant to be conveyed by the that up there. We all actually work driven by inspiration, our aspirations and our dreams, and the things like open space are very good at activating that. And you are driven by your value system. Oh, I'm doing such and such because I want to save the world, or I want to bring more this to the world, or I want to make more money, or whatever it is. There is a balancing of that if you are set up well, so that you're actually really talking with your inspiration. Something that we see a lot from Agile is the relationship with the customer. But the customer is telling you what to do, but you may be influencing the customer. You may be influencing the way they are satisfied by the way you check, are they satisfied, and enlightening them as to what's possible for them. So there should be an interactive relationship there. And then on the support service side, the budgeting operation should be very dynamic and not built on distrust, and not assuming that we don't trust everybody, but exploring ways of having the trust help guide things. So if you're in a company-wide agile situation, you are organized by cross-functional teams. They're providing the production, and they are related interactively with all the different guiding forces that the company is dealing with. And that's the image that we came up with to describe what it means to be agile, going from just the board structure to really looking at all of the influences that are hitting us from our environment.
I want to add
Jutta.
here, if I may. I know that you mentioned before, like here, that this is not a one-directional relationship. It goes both ways, and it is has the same thickness the way you see it in this illustration, which is also true for all the other relationships. And what we see when we sit down with our clients and look at, okay, how does it look in your company? Very often what we discover is that this is not true, that there is sometimes like here a missing error, or here it might not be in the same strength, the errors, or maybe here. So this is already something you can work with. So that's the one kind of where I want to put your attention to. And then another thing, just to clarify, because I'm assuming we have mainly Agile people here. So you see the product owner here, and I really want to clarify that the way we are looking at it is not necessarily the Scrum definition of there is a role of the product owner. We just see this more as a function between the value center and the customer. So it's not necessarily this person or whatever. For example, looking at it from an Agile fluency perspective, it would be the whole team who can actually make that function happen. Then for the art and spirit, another term we sometimes use here, depending on the hemisphere we are in, the North Star or the Southern Cross. So maybe this is something you are related with. Then maybe one more thing is you see that dashed circle, which means it's not that all communication or whatever action goes through these errors, everything is connected with everything actually. So that's kind of just in addition. Now, back to the questions we have asked, looking at those 5 dimensions. So the real 5 dimension it is related to structure, but it's actually a bit more than what you see here. And it is this one, what we call the connected perspective. And the connected perspective is just the expression that a company is never an island, that a company has a social, societal, whatever, environmental, and so on responsibility to the ecosystem the company lives in. So it's not enough to what we have looked at right now, ensuring that agility is nice and fine within our company. But if we really talk about company-wide agility, actually, we believe we have to go beyond the company borders and accept that a company is also living in this, in this ecosystem, which it has to nurture, but it also lives by. And so there are some things where we put out like, well, what does it mean from the customer side? Well, maybe partnership markets, but also feedback from existing products, or if we look at the North Star, Southern Hemisphere, Southern Cross, or Art and Spirit, we are looking more at sources of inspiration, the crowd, and so on. From the board, it's probably mainly the financial perspective, support service teams, it's more the legal stuff, and so on. So it, from all perspective, we are reaching further out, and we are sure that we didn't cover everything here on this slide. It's more giving you an idea that really company-wide agility means understanding you have a part in the society as well. I wonder if I forgot something, John.
No, you didn't. It just occurred to me to stretch their minds just a little bit to show something that's even not in this diagram. And that is just to help you be thinking as to what you get into with the measurements. You'll notice between the customer and the value center is a feedback loop. There is also something called a feed forward loop, in which you try to look into the future, not what happened in the past. Oh, I delivered this to you, customer, and customer says, well, that's not quite right. That's feedback. But where you're looking on the other side of the customer over there and looking at what is it that they see in their future, so that what you're delivering to is not only what they just said they needed, but what they think they're going to be needing. And taking that also as what you call feed forward. We're anticipating the future, looking forward and getting data from what we think is coming to what we deliver. And so in each of those cases, you can be looking at both feedback loops relationships, but also feed forward relationships, standing with your customer and saying, what do you see in the future? Let's look at that too. And looking at with the board, what do you see as the coming financial conditions? What do we need to be anticipating, and so forth? So it invites you, if you're looking at it from a feed forward standpoint, to stand shoulder to shoulder, the functional team, with each of these entities and say what's coming, so that we can be super agile, anticipating what's coming rather than reacting to the COVID that just hit us. And so
is this
forth.
the new term, super agile? Maybe
super agile, maybe
already.
so.
Being super agile.
Which, not just agile, but super agile.
Right. Your explanation just reminds me on something which I also find important, looking at this org chart, organigram, is often when we talk this through with clients, then one of the things that is coming up is, why actually is the customer here at the outside? Shouldn't the customer be like the focal point, the thing we are all, we concentrate everything on? And well, maybe I have to say that because it's one of my favorite examples here. Actually, I really think that would be a bad idea, because just taking the example of our North Star, Southern Cross, Art and Spirit here, maybe the things that we really value are actually contrasting what the customer wants. And my favorite example would be like what is actually happening if the customer turns out to work together with mafia? Maybe this is not something we want to support. It's not in our values. So we are not doing everything the customer wants. So it's not the center of the universe. It has to come all together because we as a company have also a purpose here. And the purpose is not only, well, the customer, but also kind of our, the thing that gives us meaning from what we are doing. Okay, so now just
Diana wants to know who's sitting in the middle.
Is it the company culture? Okay, now we are going further on. So in my understanding, company culture is something that's emerging from the behaviors and practices that we are implementing and using. So it's not really something you can grasp, but something that's emerging from the habits and behaviors. Yeah. So I'm not sure if I would say it's in the middle. Probably here I would say it's hovering all over. Is that right? You want to add something? Or?
I think in the middle is the people who are doing the delivery of what you're
value
producing.
Center.
Yeah, they're producing the value that the company is offering.
Right. Now, I just want to repeat from, you remember you did this sample survey and we said it's 5 dimensions, and I want to repeat what those 5 dimensions are. So the 4 values: transparency, self-organization, continuous learning, and constant customer focus. And the 5th dimension is the thing you're seeing right now, which is called the connected perspective. So this is then the kind of 5th thing. And I move over and head over to you anyway, okay. John.
Sure. The connected perspective really, in some sense, goes beyond the paradigm of the 4 values that you see in Agile. It's kind of an additional dimension that we're thinking needs to be there. So, in this case, the very first line is the definition of the dimension of connected perspective, and the question that you answered is the one in bold. And this has more sub-items than the other ones because it is actually perhaps the more complex one, since you're dealing with your whole environment. And you can see that it involves ecological things and the dignity and respect for compensation, and the acting ethically fairly. It has a lot of aspects to it, and typically you'll do pretty well on some of these and not so well on other ones, or there'll be a dimension that you can say, wow, how are we doing on that? I could say more about this, Jutta, but perhaps we ought to maybe.
Shall we first go back to the Menti and look what
sure.
Was the sample
let's
here?
Do that. Great. Yeah, let's do that.
So this was
the strongest dimension.
It was the best here, even.
Yeah,
3.6.
People are seeing that the company is looking more toward the community, and there's interesting in the United States. There's interesting developments like the statement by the Business Roundtable recently. That's like executives from 200 really big companies in the U.S. saying that the purpose of a corporation is no longer just to meet the requirements of the shareholders, which is actually in legal terms in the US, that's you have to vote in the best interests of the shareholders. And the 200 largest companies, a lot of major executives are saying, actually, we disagree with that. That's not true. We need to go away from that, which is kind of what we were drawing in the diagram, the 4-folded diagram here. And they're saying we have also an obligation to society and to our employees. And so this is now being supported more, and I think it's an important dimension that people are heading. And perhaps the fact that started to happen may be reflected in the scorings that you had there. I think it's even more so in Europe that companies are viewing themselves as having social responsibilities, and that may be why that score was higher than the other ones. That's just speculation, would be something
Mhm.
to be reflecting on.
Well, maybe it's also because it's just that statement and not some of the others
And it
that
could
we
be
have
it's just
chosen.
that statement, because if we could maybe look at the data there, we can
Yes.
see that typically
This one?
this is the sort of thing. This is all the dimensions that are represented but not labeled, and this is a different sort of diagram that you can get from the statistics.
Assessment.
And what this does is in the comparative agility assessment, what this shows is that on some of the dimensions, there's complete agreement. It was like a 4, and those are the 3 in the middle. But then there was this other dimension that there was a big wide spread of between 5 and 3, and so not a real consensus as to what was there. And so I think that we were probably getting a fairly high score, like that. The 3.9 is almost a 4. It's probably the spread, if we looked at it, is probably more like, in fact, the spread was fairly narrow it was showing in the Menti. So it's probably one of those middle questions, as opposed to the question here where we're looking at a wide
I'm going
spread.
to check that. So that was this one. Okay, so we see the different, votes for it, but we had more 5 and 6 over there. So
Yeah.
it was quite a spread.
It's true. It was quite a spread, but it was more looking like what's at the top there, although it's coming to the fore, where there was you had a shape where it was a tail to it, but mostly people were saying, hey, we're in pretty good shape. And then on the either end, you'll see that, okay, there was an average between 3 and 4, and really not much spread. It was a fairly narrow opinion. So you can say, well, people are fairly much agreeing. Why are some saying 3 and 4? It's not like these other ones where it's just a 4. And it's not like this third item that there's a really wide spread. And that really wide spread can be the basis of starting for a reflection. Why is it spread that way? And you can even look at the shape. Is there like one group that says 5, and then not many say 4, and then one group says 3? So you have a bifurcated opinion. Just looking at those shapes, you can say why. What are the people thinking who are answering one way versus another? What are we not? What you can look back at the way we're organized. Why that spread on that dimension? What's going on?
And so, actually, just in case you would be interested, so that would be exactly this question that you have answered. So here's the third question that had this widespread for that company we were just looking at. So that's interesting as well.
There was a widespread there, just like we had a widespread, except that the shape was quite different.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And between us and that company. And so why is that? What's the difference between that company and what we saw today? That's the sort of basis that you have for a data-based opinion, a data-based jumping off point for exploring what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So we have now looked into the details of those 5 dimensions. When you do this assessment, you can also zoom out and have a broad look at the 5 dimensions. So not kind of like what you see here, where we have been diving or drilling down into connected perspective, but looking at all the 5 dimensions at the same point in time. And so this is again the survey from that one company, and looking at it really on a higher level of the 5 dimensions, and it allows you then to drill down, for example, here and see, okay, what is actually the problem with the constant customer focus? Where do we see that this is lower than what we see in the other dimensions? It could also give you a hint that maybe you want to really focus your next steps only on the constant customer focus and leave everything where it is, because they are kind of okay here. Well, whatever. So they are at 4, or self-organization is even above 4. So probably this is where you want to focus on, and then drill down and see where is actually our biggest leverage that we can use to make a difference here. So it is, again, doing this assessment, you can have a high level view, or you can dive deep into it and just look at it, or look at the spread, or look at the outliers and all of that, which informs you about, well, where do you need to look at, and kind of leads into the next reflection, and that then into the next steps you come up with. I would think we are going to wrap up, so we have enough time for questions, unless, John, you want to add something to this one?
Nope.
Okay. So this is what you have seen, which is kind of a company-wide agility based on Bossanova, which is bringing different streams together, because it, well, Bossanova more or less says, in order to be company-wide, implement company-wide agility, you have to look beyond Agile by itself, and you have to look at these different values, the connected perspective, or if you will, and you look at this part, well, also looking at the company from really different angles in order to become Agile as a whole company. And with that, I think we first want to ask you, what's the most important or surprising concept you learned today in this session? And
I think you could respond by raising a hand, or you can just
oh, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry, do you hear
So
me?
we're encouraging you to
Yeah.
just put in a phrase or a single word.
Yes, a word, and again, it's the same Menti than before, and here's the code, and you can just enter like a single word, or you can also enter 2 words actually. And there are and you have several fields where you can enter those words, or that one keyword. And we are waiting for you to understand what was maybe the most surprising or important, the connected perspective, which I think is really sometimes forgotten, especially if we focus on Agile as it is defined, then it's so much inward looking. Well, we look at delivery, but we are not looking at our responsibility to the outside world. And so I would agree with that. Oh, feed forward loops. That's good that you did the detour, John. And holistic nature, bidirectional feedback. It's another thing that we are seeing here. Any others that, yeah, what surprised you, or what you found important here? Nothing surprising, nothing important. Oh, culture. Okay. Yeah. The culture which is hovering over. Customer and outer loop, and it's not the focal point. Yeah. Anything else? And while you are entering it, you can also think of any questions you might have. But I think we wait a little bit more for any things you found important or surprising. And maybe this is still open, and we are happy to get your answers here. And oh, I shouldn't have talked. I just see. I hand over to you, John.
Okay, why don't we hop back to this in a moment while people have
Yes.
more time to fill that in. So in summary, we talked about key metrics that you can use in the with your own company, or if we saw a lot of Agile coaches, other companies that you're helping to carry them on their Agile journey from the cradle in the IT area to the whole company, and a metric-driven basis of reflecting on how that's going. Also helping you to decide your next actions by analyzing things like, do we agree or disagree? Are there some dimensions that we're like all agreeing in? Well, why do we have disagreements? What is behind the agreement that we're getting? Isn't that interesting and unusual? What things we're doing could be that we can learn from on that. The strengths and weaknesses, of course, of all these different dimensions, and giving you many dimensions to look at. Also, the database tools let you verify that there was a change. They give you a basis of a pre and post measure that you can use as you probe and experiment with different practices in the company. So that's the essence of what we were trying to say.